Trump and Ecuador's President Daniel Noboa just launched the first U.S. land combat operation against South American cartels in over 40 years.
The deployment of military forces to Ecuador in an operation targeting designated terrorist organizations throughout the country. In this announcement just posted late tonight, those Pentagon officials saying they are taking decisive action to confront narco-terrorism who have long inflicted terror, violence, and corruption.
Humiliating Los Lobos and the Sinaloa Cartel with devastating joint airstrikes. The operation comes after 22 massacres linked to these cartels that left hundreds of people dead across Ecuador. But here's where this story gets even darker. The leader of Los Lobos, now facing murder charges for assassinating a presidential candidate, is accusing President Noboa himself of ordering that assassination to win the 2023 election. And Ecuador's former president is backing that accusation, calling Noboa a criminal who won office through murder. On Tuesday, U.S. Southern Command announced that the United States and Ecuador had conducted joint military operations against designated terrorist organizations in Ecuador.
U.S. forces also taking part in military operations in Ecuador, targeting what the administration calls designated terrorist organizations operating there. The U.S. Southern Command releasing this video tonight saying the U.S. and Ecuador are taking decisive action to confront narco-terrorists. For months, the U.S. has been targeting what it says are drug-running boats off the coasts of South America. This is the first time the U.S. military has engaged in a land operation targeting South American drug cartels.
This marks the first time, officially, that the U.S. military has engaged in land combat operations against South American drug cartels and gangs since the 1980s. The last major U.S. military operation targeting cartels in South America was during the war against Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel in Colombia. Since then, U.S. involvement has been limited to training, intelligence sharing, and occasional airstrikes against smuggling boats that killed 152 alleged traffickers. What's happening in Ecuador right now represents a fundamental escalation in how the United States approaches cartel violence in South America. President Noboa announced the operations in advance, writing on X, "In March, we will conduct joint operations with our regional allies, including the United States." On Monday, Noboa held talks in Quito with U.S. Southern Command Chief Francis Donovan and Mark Schaefer, head of U.S. Special Operations in Central and South America and the Caribbean. The targets are specific: Los Choneros and Los Lobos, the two most powerful criminal organizations in Ecuador. Los Choneros is linked to Mexico's Sinaloa Cartel. Los Lobos is connected to the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Both organizations have been designated as foreign terrorist organizations by the Trump administration, the same legal classification used for ISIS and Al-Qaeda. This designation allows the U.S. military to conduct combat operations against these groups under anti-terrorism authorities, not just enforcement. The U.S. Embassy in Ecuador reported the arrest of 16 people, including a former assemblyman, allegedly linked to the Albanian mafia and Los Lobos. This network sent massive quantities of drugs to Europe in shipping containers. But to understand why these operations are happening now, and why they've become so politically charged, you need to go back to August 2023, to the assassination that changed everything in Ecuador and set these military strikes in motion. But investigators would soon discover something disturbing. The gunmen may not have been the real masterminds behind the killing, because the cartels being targeted today are the same organizations accused of murdering a presidential candidate in broad daylight.
Speaking to supporters in what became his last speech.
This democracy cost our lives. This country has cost our lives. We won't permit a new treason.
Presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio was shot while inside a truck moments after leaving this rally, where he spoke about the dangers of challenging drug cartels and addressing the corruption gripping Ecuador. Authorities said at least 9 others were injured in the shooting. The gunman was reportedly killed by police.
Vivimos una película de terror.
We experienced a horror movie.
30, 40 shots were fired with machine guns, and we saw the wounded fall. I know there are some dead, and sadly, Fernanda Villavicencio was assassinated.
And the conspiracy behind that assassination may involve the very president now ordering these airstrikes. August 2023. Presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio was leaving a campaign rally in Quito when Colombian gunmen opened fire, assassinating him in broad daylight.
A presidential candidate who vowed to root out corruption was shot and killed after a rally on Wednesday. 7 suspects from Colombia were arrested. 1 died after a gun battle.
Villavicencio wasn't just any candidate. He was an investigative journalist turned politician who had been outspoken about links between Los Choneros gang and the Sinaloa Cartel. More importantly, he was exposing corruption at the highest levels of Ecuador's government, targeting businessmen and former officials involved in schemes with the cartels. His assassination sent shockwaves through Ecuador. This was a presidential candidate murdered during an active election campaign. The Ecuadorian prosecutor's office has now charged Wilmer Giovanni Chavarria, known as Pipo, head of Los Lobos gang, as an alleged participant in planning the murder. Chavarria is currently detained in Spain fighting extradition. But here's where the story takes a dramatic turn. According to the public ministry, a group of businessmen linked to corruption schemes that Villavicencio was pursuing, along with former minister Jose Serrano, were the actual conspirators behind the assassination. And then Chavarria himself made an explosive accusation. He claimed that President Daniel Noboa ordered the assassination. The cartel leader charged with planning the murder is accusing the current president of Ecuador of being the one who actually ordered the hit. Former Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa immediately seized on Chavarria's accusation.
We are not used to this kind of crime. There is not similar crimes in Ecuadorian contemporaneous history. So for us, it's very, very hard. So it's a new phenomenon, if you want, and there is a huge problem right now. Well, perhaps always we have had, perhaps in my own government, criminal gangs, international gangs, but for the first time, the gangs has infiltrated the government, the public sector, and that is a big problem for Ecuador, for my country right now.
Mr. President, who do you blame for this murder?
Well, you know, we are used to listen anything from the haters, but the real thing is that there was perhaps a police plot conspiracy. Why? How can you imagine that, well, Fernando Villavicencio was a person in high risk, okay? How can you imagine that they don't wait for the armored car, his armored car, the armored car, Villavicencio armored car arrived 2 minutes after the assassination, and how can you imagine that they put Fernando Villavicencio alone in a common vehicle without driver, without even the driver? Now they cannot find his cell phone.
On his X account, Correa wrote, "Remember how Villavicencio's wife accused Daniel Noboa and Diana Salazar, Attorney General, of being behind her husband's death? Now it all makes sense. Noboa won in 2023 through murder and in 2025 through fraud. Criminal. This is extraordinary. A former president is publicly calling the current president a murderer who assassinated his political rival to win office." Villavicencio's widow had indeed publicly questioned whether political forces were behind her husband's assassination. At the time, many dismissed her statements as grief-driven speculation. But now, with a cartel leader facing charges specifically naming political conspirators, those questions don't seem so far-fetched. The timeline is suspicious. Villavicencio was gaining momentum, exposing corruption that implicated powerful people. Then he was murdered by professional hitmen weeks before the election. Noboa won that election. Now, Noboa is conducting unprecedented military operations against the very cartels allegedly involved in the assassination. Is this justice, or is it a cover-up? To understand why cartels have so much influence in Ecuadorian politics, you need to understand Ecuador's role in the global cocaine trade. Ecuador is the world's largest export point for cocaine. Around 70% of all drugs produced by Colombia and Peru are shipped through Ecuador. Ecuador became the perfect hub for the cocaine trade. It sits between Colombia and Peru, the world's 2 largest producers, with major Pacific ports that ship straight to Europe and North America. Over time, cartels like Los Choneros and Los Lobos turned Ecuador into a global cocaine superhighway, and until recently, Ecuador's government was either unable or unwilling to seriously confront the cartels controlling this trade. The violence between Los Choneros and Los Lobos has been catastrophic. The 22 massacres are just the most visible incidents. Prison riots orchestrated by these gangs have left hundreds dead. Entire neighborhoods in cities like Guayaquil have become war zones. Police officers, judges, prosecutors, and politicians who tried to resist cartel influence were threatened, bribed, or killed. The cartels weren't just shipping drugs. They were effectively governing parts of Ecuador, collecting taxes, providing services, and operating parallel power structures to the official government. And at the center of Los Choneros' operations was one man who became a legend in Ecuador's underworld: José Adolfo Macias, known as Fito. One of the most significant recent developments was the recapture and extradition of José Adolfo Macias, known as Fito. Fito's story is one of the most extraordinary examples of cartel power corrupting an entire prison system.
For a year and a half, he was Ecuador's most wanted criminal. In March 2025, Ecuadorian authorities offered a whopping $1 million bounty for information leading to his capture. His escape was a pivotal moment in Ecuador's battle against organized crime. It sparked a military crackdown on the prison system, and in retaliation, gangs coordinated attacks on public institutions, including the takeover of a television station while on air.
José Adolfo Macias had been incarcerated for years, officially serving time for trafficking and organized crime. But being behind bars didn't stop him from running Los Choneros. In fact, his prison cell became his command center. From inside Guayaquil Regional Prison, one of Ecuador's most notorious facilities, Fito coordinated shipments, ordered assassinations, managed cartel finances, and even conducted business meetings with corrupt officials who would visit him.
This is Ecuadorian gang leader José Adolfo Macias, better known as Fito, photographed on his way to the United States. It was in this Brooklyn court on Monday he was charged with 7 crimes related to running an international criminal organization, the Ecuadorian gang known as Los Choneros. After the hearing, Fito's lawyer spoke about the case against him.
We don't know what's going to happen yet. We haven't seen the evidence, and so we need to see the evidence and then decide what to do.
He was arrested in a basement hideaway in his hometown 3 weeks ago. He had escaped from an Ecuadorian prison where he was serving a 34-year sentence, but still managed to oversee the criminal enterprise. On Monday, Ecuadorian officials spoke about the impact of his extradition on criminal organizations.
His extradition to the United States was a major victory for Noboa's government and a significant blow to Los Choneros' leadership. Fito is now facing arraignment in the United States on trafficking and organized crime charges.
The extradition of Fito takes place less than a month after his recapture and is a strong blow to organized crime. The extradition of Macias Villamar, as well as operations to dismantle criminal economies, are actions that weaken mafias, and the national government is determined to continue in that fight.
Prosecutors have accused Macias of trafficking thousands of pounds of cocaine into the United States, smuggling weapons out, and ordering extreme acts of violence on those who got in their way. Since he took over Los Choneros in 2020, Ecuador has seen an explosion in gang violence related to drug trafficking that has included political assassinations, kidnapping, and the killing of journalists.
His extradition sent a clear message. Ecuador would no longer allow cartel leaders to operate with impunity, even from inside prison cells. What's happening in Ecuador represents a fundamental shift in how South American countries are approaching cartel violence. For decades, the model was domestic law enforcement with U.S. intelligence and financial support. Military operations were rare and controversial, but Los Lobos and Los Choneros grew so powerful that traditional law enforcement couldn't contain them anymore. The designation of these gangs as foreign terrorist organizations changed the rules entirely. Now, they're not just criminal organizations to be arrested, they're enemy combatants to be targeted with military force. The joint airstrikes, combat operations, deployment of U.S. Special Operations Forces. This is a new model for confronting cartels in South America. If it proves successful in Ecuador, other countries facing similar cartel violence may adopt the same approach. Colombia is watching closely. Peru faces its own cartel problems. Even Mexico might reconsider its approach if Ecuador demonstrates that direct military action can work. But success isn't guaranteed, and the political questions surrounding Villavicencio's assassination remain unanswered. If Noboa really did order the assassination to eliminate a political rival, then these military operations could be destroying the evidence and witnesses who might implicate him. If Chavarria's accusations are false, manufactured by a desperate cartel leader, then Noboa is simply doing what any president should do, destroying the criminal organizations that murdered a presidential candidate. The truth may never be fully known. Political assassinations in Latin America rarely result in complete accountability, especially when the alleged conspirators are now in power. What is certain is that Los Lobos and Los Choneros are being systematically dismantled. Their leaders are dead, arrested, or in hiding. Their operations are being disrupted by joint U.S.-Ecuador military action, and the message being sent to other cartels operating in Ecuador is clear. The days of operating with impunity are over. Military strikes may dismantle cartel networks and remove their leaders, but unless the businessmen, politicians, and officials who enabled these criminal groups are exposed and punished, new organizations will simply rise to replace them, and Ecuador could find itself trapped in the same cycle of violence all over again. So the real question now isn't just whether these airstrikes will destroy the cartels, it's whether Ecuador can eliminate the corruption that allowed them to thrive in the first place. Trump and Noboa have dealt a significant blow to the Sinaloa Cartel and CJNG's operations in Ecuador. The joint military strikes represent unprecedented cooperation and a new willingness to use military force against South American cartels. But the political conspiracy surrounding Villavicencio's assassination casts a shadow over these operations. Are these strikes justice for 22 massacres and hundreds of victims? Or are they a cover-up for political murder at the highest levels? The 152 traffickers killed in previous U.S. operations pale in comparison to what's happening now. This is full-scale combat, not just interdiction. Ecuador has become the testing ground for whether military force can succeed where law enforcement failed. The cartels that once controlled Ecuador's ports, prisons, and politics are being humiliated and destroyed. But the corruption that enabled them may still remain hidden within the very government conducting these operations. But what do you think? Is President Noboa a hero fighting to save Ecuador from cartel control, or is he a criminal who assassinated his rival and is now eliminating the witnesses? Should the United States be conducting land combat operations in South America? And can military strikes actually defeat cartels, or will new organizations simply emerge to replace them? Please feel free to share your thoughts with us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth videos like this. Meanwhile, click on any of the cards on your screen right now to watch more of our videos.